It's time for the Voice of Reason podcast. Here are your hosts, Sean Phillips, Andy Van Beber, and Travis Kirkendall.
And ladies and gentlemen, we are live. It is Thursday, November 16th. The year is 2023. And
look at this guy.
Osama bin Laden.
Look at this guy. Look at this guy right here. Look, it's Sean Phillips.
This is Osama bin Laden.
Oh.
I have been translated and reborn as the hero of America. You can just ask TikTok. That is exactly that is exactly who I am. Osama bin Laden, Mother Teresa, Rosa Parks, put them in the same category. They are the heroes that this world didn't deserve.
Did you see that Babylon Bee post?
No.
Talking about that?
No.
So Babylon Bee did a post of like college has poster of Obama Hope. Remember the Obama Hope poster that was like when he was running for president? It was like university puts up Bin Laden Hope poster. It's like the same poster, but it's like Bin Laden.
Do you have any idea what we're talking about?
No, I don't. Please enlighten me, please.
So, like within the last 2 days, so there was a letter that Osama bin Laden wrote that was on The Guardian, and I guess within the last week, it was translated into English. And then there are some liberals out there. We'll call them liberals because I don't want to use the term fucking moron. They're and again, not all liberals are this way, but this particular
then use that term because let's not just state the general liberal.
So that's right. You're absolutely right, Travis. These fucking morons said, you know what? Osama bin Laden had a point. And I'm not I'm not saying
God.
It's like these were people.
God.
I'm not saying that these were people that were just being ironic about it. These were people that were like, oh my God, you know what? 9/11 makes a little bit of sense now. I am not even joking. I would not be surprised if when you ask some of your students about it, anyone see Osama bin Laden on TikTok, they'd be like, you mean the civil rights activist Osama bin Laden? Yeah, we've seen him on TikTok.
Is that actually cool experiment? Try that tomorrow. Just pick your students' brains. I want to know what they say.
I am so.
What do you guys know about Osama bin Laden?
I'm so afraid.
What's trending on TikTok about Bin Laden? Wow,
Golly.
what a time! What a time, gents.
We are in a time, and gentlemen, I know it has been far too long. It has been an adventure the last couple of weeks. But to be back here, man. To be able to, it has been a minute. Yeah, I won't lie. It is so good to be back. I'm excited to be back. Because the more things change, the more they stay the same, especially with everything that's going on in the world. But no, here we are, and I feel like now that I'll be back and in the swing of things. Now that the dust has kind of settled here for me. There's a lot that we, have to cover. There's a lot that I've watched you guys kind of talk about. And, man, we are living in a time, and I'm just glad to say for some of our listeners that don't know, I at least don't have to see it on the front lines of Los Angeles anymore for the, foreseeable future.
Yes. So, yeah, definitely back in, there we go. Yep. Back in Kansas City, right? Kansas City?
Yes. Yep, we are in the northland part of Kansas City.
Okay, good.
Nice.
So, can you share what you're doing now, or do you?
Of course, yeah. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and actually, off air, I'll talk with you guys about a couple different things. But no, So essentially, for most of our, our regular listeners that listen, and so if there are any new listeners joining us this week or whenever you catch this episode, so I was in Los Angeles for about a year and a half. My family and we were out there, had a blast in Los Angeles, phenomenal time. a couple of things changed towards the tail end of our time. I would say the beginning of this year, there was a bit of a shift in how work was working, and that was Los Angeles. That was Hollywood in general. Many of you guys know there was the strikes. My work wasn't directly affected by the strike. However, it was affected by the strike, in the fact where I got a full-fledged dose of what the show business side of things are, and how crippling it can be for some people. Um, I I'll get into it here in a little bit, but essentially, if it would have just been myself and Tony and Julian, things might have been a little bit different. We had a plan of what we were going to kind of do out there, but since we added a little one to the roster, Tony and I talked about it, and we came to the conclusion that the best deal for us was to be closer to friends, closer to family, and then just in a position where, we're not around the rat race of crazy all the time. We wanted to get to a spot where things were a little bit more slowed down, and where we could still focus on the things that we're working on. And so we just decided coming back to Missouri, and Kansas City especially was a spot that fit really well for us.
Well, that's great. I mean, one of the things that we have, I think that's good about our show is that we can, of course, we communicate all the time, and one of the things that I can let you guys, not like this is a big behind the curtain thing, because we've shared this on the air, is we've always had the standing agreement that, hey, if one of us can't do it, the other two can do it, and just we've all, if you need to take time for life happens with us, and we took last week off because, hey, new dad up there in the corner there. Congratulations, Travis. But
thank you, sir.
But we took last week off. I was basketball. I'm still basketballed out. And hello, beautiful. There's the beautiful girl right there. And then we've had just life happen, and life is moving. We're kind of doing a different show tonight. I think that there's some things that we're going to look at on future dates, but just in general, that the pace at which life is moving now, I think for all of us is kind of alarming, and we decided that tonight we needed to take a step back. I think Travis said before the show, I'm all current evented out, it's just the level of just craziness right now is just insane. And but we have to it's kind of funny to see how just something that Travis was saying before the show was, man, we're not really seeing the big picture, I don't think, anymore. And so, but Travis, why don't you fill us in a little bit about what's been going on in your life in the last week, and give us a little update.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, yeah, I'm a dad now. Almost 2 weeks going. Thomas was born Sunday at 3:58 p.m., November 5th. Went very good, no issues, natural birth, and man, it's been awesome. It hasn't been, obviously you hear horror stories with like newborns and like you're never gonna sleep again and all this stuff. It's been fine. Have I lost an hour or two of sleep? Yeah. Do I drink an extra cup of coffee? Yeah. It honestly, that's way overblown. I will say I think we've been very lucky with him. But it's been great, man. Every moment of it is just fantastic. You fall in absolute love with them.
Mm-hmm.
You never realize how much you can love something until that you meet your own child, man, and it's so cool. I know you guys get it because you're both dads, but yeah, it's great, man. Loving every second of it. Every day is rewarding. And mom was pretty tired tonight. I got home and told her, "Hey, you just sleep for a few hours so me and Me and little man just sat here on this little nursing chair and just hung out for about 3.5 hours. He just slept. But it's been great. Life's been good. I was able to get back to work fairly early. Thank God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, life's good for now. Life's good when I stay off Instagram. Like I was saying, you get on there, and when I said like I was current event analysis, I get on there and you just start doom scrolling. It's like Northern Provision post, OAF Nation post. I follow all these like military channels and current event channels just because of my background, and that's what interests me.
Uh-huh.
But God, it'll really burn you out. You think World War III is about to break out any moment.
It really does. That's why I'm probably going to deactivate Twitter, because there's like pages I don't even follow. Like I don't follow them, yet I will see several of these channels over and over again that are like tweeting shit like the West has fallen, military aged men from these countries are coming to our shores, coming to Europe's shores, and the end is nigh, and this is it. And it's every post, it's every single thing I see now. And I'm with you, Travis. I am current evented out as much as I can be.
Do you think that it's...
But it's in the same token, though, like it is important to pay attention to this stuff. I think that we just pay a lot more attention than the normal person, just because we have a podcast that, while it is a political podcast and like a social issue podcast, there's a lot of foreign policy stuff that we cover. And with everything, so much big breaking news being like foreign policy related stuff, it's kind of what we've been following. And those are pretty heavy subjects and can be a little frightening at times. But it's good to step away. It's good to step away for a bit and not look at the latest Israel update or the latest Ukraine update or any of that stuff.
It was oh, by the way, our one of our newer listeners, Sean, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but he's been listening to us quite a bit. Jonathan Guthrie says, Travis, being a dad is the best job. Congratulations. Welcome to the Dad Club. So,
thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
But yeah, so if I take a second to look at other things, if I get too overwhelmed, I'm like you guys. If I get too overwhelmed with what's on my social media safe, if I don't know if this is, you can laugh at me if I say this, but my social media safe place anymore is Facebook. I have totally depoliticized my Facebook as much as I can.
Good.
Because I had to get this from looking at different, watching different videos. I've told you guys all about the Social Dilemma movie, which if you have not watched it, it's free on YouTube. Watch it. It talks about the deep dark hole that is Facebook. But it also tells you at the end on how to basically dig deep down. And if you want to get all the crap off of there, they show you. It can be a little bit of a process, but if you do it, I promise you that it is Facebook is just what Facebook for me is what I wanted it to be. All my hobbies, all my stuff, all the people I follow, all the, I'm into this. I don't have a musician bone in my body, but I love following different drummers. I'm on this Chad Smith kick right now, who's the drummer for Red Hot Chili Peppers. He did this a couple weeks ago. He did this thing with Drumeo, and where he played just Blind. He played this song you never heard before, Blind. It was pretty cool. But it's just stuff like that. That's what Facebook is for me. And when the times that I get on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, or Instagram, is when you guys send me links, and then I'm kind of like you guys. When I start scrolling down through there, I'm just like, Judas Priest, what? What? I mean, people are straight up nuts. I
think too.
Go ahead.
Well, go on. Keep saying. Make your point. Keep going. I'm sorry.
When you look at Sean, you look at what's in your arms right now, and I mean, you look into the eyes of a child, and you look into the eyes. This is the bigger picture. The future is the bigger picture. Our children are the bigger picture, And we should be about making a world that is better for our kids. And instead, we're too busy infighting and we're too busy doing all this stuff. And man, I've had my last 2 weeks have been a whirlwind for myself. I mean, not whirlwind like you guys have had, of course, but whirlwind for me is I've got to spend probably more time with my daughter than I have probably in the last year, because this is our travel year for basketball. And so we have a lot of bus time and we have a lot of truck time. And when I say truck time, I mean coming back home from games, and we talk and talk and talk. And, seeing life from the perspective of my 12-year-old, soon to be 13-year-old teenager, wow, but teenage daughter is, seeing the world from her eyes and from the eyes of my son is a whole lot different than, it's refreshing. It really is refreshing, because they're not burdened down with all the stuff that we take in, and I take a step back. I'm just like, I just need to look at the world through the eyes of a child, and I think it can be, is it a little bit naive? Yeah, it's going to be a little bit naive, but at the same time, man, it gives me something, like you said, Travis, earlier, you never know something. The first time I held Briley on my lap, you described exactly how I felt. I'm sure you described how Sean felt. But it really is, and it only gets better. It only gets better, and being a part of my children's life, it's been an honor watching my kids grow up, and it's hard for me to imagine that, I've got 6, possibly 7 more summers with my daughter living, and then on to bigger and better things, I guess,
It goes fast, right?
It does go fast. Because you guys were in high school when I brought my kids home,
Mm-hmm.
and
yeah, you made me feel like an old piece of shit when you're like, yeah, Bradley's a teenager, and I'm like, oh my god, like that's crazy. Because I remember whenever you guys did adopt her, and photos when she was a baby, and when you shared those, with us, and so that's crazy how fast.
And just to show,
it feels like it's gone by.
Here's a point of reference, Sean. I'm just going to share a funny story. Walk down memory lane, if you will. So this is for people who don't know me very well, but it's a great story. So we're back in China getting Bryson. And my student teacher, who I had at the time, was also subbing for me, was full-time sub. And she messages me and she says, hey, I think there's been this cheating going on this test that you just gave. And I was like, and I said, can you confirm it? She's like, yeah, I can confirm it. I'm like, okay. She said, do you want to, she says, you're going to take care of this when you get back? I said, I'm going to take care of it when you get into class. She said, well, and it was my 4th hour class. So that class started at 11 o'clock. And so that would put us at 2 o'clock in the morning in China. And so I messaged, and at the time, not everybody was having iPhones. I knew that Sean had an iPhone, and Sean and I had already kind of developed a good student-teacher relationship, and he was a senior at the time. I said, hey, I need you to do me a favor. Can you go down to my class, 4th hour, and hold your phone up? And he's like, yeah. I said, I'm going to FaceTime you at 11 o'clock, go down to my room, 4th hour. So I stayed up until 2 o'clock in the morning, and thank goodness we had a suite at the hotel so I could go into the other room. And I literally, from 14 hours ahead of, and I'm chewing butt out from across the planet, and Sean, the whole time I asked my teacher, I said, well, what was Sean doing? She said, Sean, we're just sitting there holding the phone like this, just sitting there going like this. And so.
No, I remember, yeah, because like I didn't know what the conversation was going to be about. And so I was just like kind of happily smiling, like just like, like y'all are idiots. And so, yeah, good times.
Yeah, but that just shows you how fast time goes, and how man, it it goes by in a hurry, and I mean some of these kids who I coach now are coaching my kids, and some of the it's unreal to say that now you guys are what year you guys graduated? You guys were what
14.
14. I knew it was in that neighborhood, but it was yeah. So, but anything? What's and one other thing I want to point out, just because I can, and Sean's on the show this week. I am a loser in fantasy football, but I can proudly say that I beat Sean with the B team this week in fantasy football. Not even the A team, because the A team was on a bye week. Beat Sean with the B team. Only my third win of the year. So, I mean, thank you. But
I have fantasy football this year has been excruciating. Except there's one league. So I'm in 3. I'm in a dynasty league. I'm in and then 2 regular fantasy leagues, and one of them is somehow going well, and I don't know how. That was the one I felt was one of my worst leagues, and yet I'm like in second place in that one, and only on the uptick. So the other 2 leagues, they're a lost cause this year. So I'm just anymore watching football, because my actual team's good. Or no, let me rephrase that. My actual team is shit. My fantasy teams are shit. So football this year for me has been a pretty rough experience.
I don't mean to leave Travis out of this too much, because I know he's not much of a sports guy. But Sean, just quick, what's your thoughts on now that we are halfway through the NFL season? What's your thoughts on this current season?
Definitely this season, more than any season, I think it's a toss-up. I could say that out of the NFC, I don't see how anyone that's not the 49ers or the Eagles is in the Super Bowl. I genuinely don't know how. The AFC is a little bit different. I think the Chiefs have pretty much distanced themselves from everyone else in the AFC, because I feel like aside from their loss to Denver, and then their earlier loss to Detroit, who's Detroit's a very good team. But I feel like Kansas City is probably the shoe-in, in my opinion, for the AFC, because it's weird. Like the teams that everyone, and even everyone on paper was like, it's finally these teams' years. They've not been good. And this is like one of the first years in football in a long time where the playing field is pretty much like there's maybe 4 teams on top, and then it's like there's a vast drop off. Yeah. It feels like, which it makes it more interesting to watch on any given Sunday. I like that. This is the first year I've ever had Red Zone and Sunday Ticket, because I got the student discount for really cheap. So I've enjoyed watching a lot of teams that I normally wouldn't watch. Mm-hmm. There are some young players that are playing extremely well. There's some players that you would think would be playing well, and they're getting their offensive coordinator fired. I mean, it is
Bills, right?
Yeah, it's crazy to me how this year has kind of shaped out. I mean, there's good things, like the Bears being awful is amazing, because I remember at the beginning of the year it was Justin Fields, I think, was number 2 in the MVP betting odds, and he's awful. Deshaun Watson still can't get hand jobs off his mind, and he's awful, and that's probably one of my favorite. I mean, you pay a guy $230 million for him to be dog shit and then to get injured, and probably an injury that's, why would he come back? Like, why come back and worry? I mean, you're $230 million guaranteed. Mm-hmm. So as long as you show up on the team, mm-hmm. as long as you show up, you're going to get paid. So he could be, he could ride the bench to the biggest contract in the NFL, in the history of the NFL. Yeah. So
I was really one of the pleasant surprises, and a team that I'm silently cheering for, which I've always kind of, is the Texans. I like this kid, C.J. Stroud. This kid is fun to watch. He's pretty good. I've enjoyed watching the Lions play. There's a kid from Quincy, Illinois, who played for Quincy High. That is that kid De La Porta he's Quincy native. He played at Quincy High, and he's making a big difference for the Lions. I've enjoyed. This has been one of those football seasons. I'm ready for Monday night. I think it's going to be a great. I mean, you have the Chiefs and the Eagles who are coming off a bye week. Both are fresh. Both are on the top of their divisions, and I mean it's going to be a great preview of probably what's going to come. But and then Sean and I talked about this a couple weeks ago, and I want to get, and then we'll talk some fight stuff because Travis and I talked some fight stuff, and I wanted to get Sean's input on the last big UFC fight, or not the UFC fight. What was that fight we were talking about, Travis, a couple weeks ago? It was
Ngannou and Tyson Fury.
Yeah, yep. But
that was a big one.
Yeah,
there was big UFC fights.
UFC. So they had the UFC fight this last Saturday, which was interesting as well. But Sean is a wrestling aficionado, and I was complaining. So I get really big into WWE whenever there's. I don't watch their weekly stuff. I watch their pay-per-views. And I was intrigued by this guy, L.A. Knight. I think he reminded me. I'm a fan of WWF, the Attitude Era. That's what I came. That was that's really where I got plugged into WWE, because my students at the time were, Undertaker. They loved Stone Cold and The Rock and all these guys, and D-Generation X and all that stuff. And then they kind of toned down for a while, and now this guy L.A. Knight reminds me a lot. And I thought, okay, going with Roman Reigns as long as they have went with Roman Reigns, and I thought this guy L.A. Knight was coming up, and he was going to be his story. And then I did research on this guy, looking at his story. Holy cow! You want to talk about a journeyman? This guy had been in the crap of the crap leagues and just worked his way up, and all the, and he was called one of the best promo men in the business, and you see, I was thoroughly impressed, and I thought, man, this is going to be the guy who's going to do some good stuff in the WWE. And then I watched Crown Jewel, and it's like, oh, Roman Reigns. What's from the wrestling producer and wrestler yourself point of view? What were your thoughts on all that?
So the thing about LA Knight, you're right. He's a journeyman. He's been a professional for a very long time. He actually was the heritage champion of the company that I worked for.
Oh, you're kidding me!
In Championship Wrestling.
So he did.
LA Knight or Eli Drake, as he used to be known as.
Eli Drake. He did the same thing.
He came up through Championship Wrestling. Like, that was through there, the NWA. I mean, no joke, he and I have slept, not together obviously, but on the same couch in the same person's house. He used to live at a house that I worked out of when I was in Los Angeles. So Sean has been around the business for a long time. Went to NXT, signed a developmental deal. Triple H loved him from the get-go. Sean was I mean, he is, he's in his 40s, and doesn't look it,
No.
Looks like, I mean, the dude is cut. And, it's right now they have lightning in a bottle, and I just hope they don't let it spark out. And you asked, you would kind of ask me, why is it still Roman? Why is it this? I think there's a couple of different things. Obviously, WWE and the UFC are now merged.
Mm-hmm.
They are now a publicly traded company together. I think it's so. people harp on. I was talking to a good friend of mine the other day about this, and give me 1 second. Hopefully she doesn't lose it. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
So people harp on the era where John Cena was the guy that ran that show for almost a decade. Okay. The company was in a weird spot where they were making more money than ever, but it was due to sponsorships. It had nothing to do with ratings, because television was kind of changing in general anyway. So John Cena had the difficult job of going from the Attitude Era into an era where it was called the Ruthless Aggression. That was the transitional period between the Attitude Era to what they call the PG era. And people complain because, John Cena was on top for about a decade. Now we get to the point where John Cena is now in Hollywood. WWE is in this awkward spot where they have decided to shoehorn themselves into a place where they have trouble making stars. What I mean by that is they have trouble making mainstream stars. They're stars as far as wrestling goes. They make wrestling stars better than anyone, better than AEW, better than New Japan. WWE makes wrestling stars better than anyone, and in my opinion, it is non-debatable.
Right.
The problem is wrestling today, on average, Raw, SmackDown they do. SmackDown might do 2 million viewers per week, and we're talking from a time where in the late 90s and the early 2000s, they're doing 12 million, 15 million views per week.
Right.
WWE, wrestling, professional wrestling in general, is no longer it no longer has mainstream appeal. So individuals that do have that mainstream appeal, like Roman Reigns, guys, they are safe tickets to where you can put Roman Reigns on Jimmy Kimmel, you can put him on Jimmy Fallon, you can put him on cereal boxes, because he has become a household name to the even just casual wrestling fan. WWE has a harder time getting some of these other individuals into that spot. One that they almost did, but again, she ended up leaving, was Sasha Banks.
Mm-hmm.
And Sasha Banks was in The Mandalorian. Had a small role, but a reoccurring speaking role in one of the biggest television shows of the last 5 years.
I didn't realize that.
Yes.
I know.
Now she's no longer. She's no longer in WWE. So I think that's the problem, is when they get people that are at that level where they can be big stars, the problem is now they lose them. And I think with Roman, they kind of have a guy that, because regardless of what people think about Roman's a company guy through and through.
Yeah.
He is a company guy. If Roman wanted to do Hollywood full time, Roman could do Hollywood. It is just a matter of time. In my opinion, it is just a matter of time before he follows The Rock, Batista, and John Cena down that path. Where WWE is in trouble is because they are, I think, afraid to pass that torch. They don't know who that next guy is. And people are like, yes, they want LA Knight, but I think for guys like Triple H to go, okay, but if I put it on LA Knight, he's in his early 40s.
I got you.
I can't do I get 10 years out of this guy? Or who, there's people that, I think they have an idea could be that next person, your Austin Theories. There's a couple other people in NXT, but the problem is, in this era, it's hard to create stars. I think they have an idea of who those individuals are, but getting them. So part of it too is in WWE, off the cusp promos are a thing of the past.
Right.
It is few and far between who they let do their own promos, which was such a big thing that created Stone Cold, The Rock, John Cena, all these guys from the 90s, early 2000s, where now they're all written and you can just tell they're written. And so that makes it harder for the talent to get over to the fans, and then it's kind of a vicious cycle. Wrestling's in a weird spot,
you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I just did some research here. I'm just looking on, and this is basically on Fightful.com. They're comparing all the different, just the numbers in general, and the numbers in general on wrestling has really, it's surprisingly how it is doing it like it. So the first one that they did a 4-year period here in January of 2019. Like Raw average, it looks like Raw in 2019 was in, pretty much all of 2019 into 2020, into about March of 2020, they were above 2 million viewers. And then you can see when COVID hit, it kind of just plummeted. And now, they went in January of 2019 to 2.324 million viewers to this last week's episode had 1.467 million viewers. And that's, and I use this to transition into, so last week's UFC fight, UFC, what was it, 295, something like that?
I believe so.
And you had, of course you had a double, you had a double main event. Does UFC do that a lot, Travis? Do they do a lot of co-main events? I thought that was kind of unusual.
It's not uncommon. It's just, if there's big fights to make, they make it.
Yeah, I would say
Jones and Stipe was going to be the big one, but they ended up having a great filler for that.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon, though. It just doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like the way that they kind of do it, and this is no offense to any of those fighters, is if there's someone that they're wanting to, introduce people to, and even like champions, so for example, Demetrius Johnson was arguably one of the best fighters of all time. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if he ever headlined a pay-per-view as champion. He was a free fight night guy, and he would be co-main title fights like very, very often. He might have had 1 or 2 pay-per-views where he headlined. For some champions in some divisions, it's not uncommon for them to be on, a pay-per-view as the co-main, where they have, because that's the thing about boxing and MMA is if you have one person, that's a champion or a McGregor, for example, who cares who's on the rest of the card?
Well,
you can kind of put whatever you want, but this card we were actually blessed with. Even though it was supposed to be Jones and Stipe, there were great fights all night. It was a phenomenal card.
It was a good card.
And did you guys? I don't know if you guys saw this week, but I caught this off of ESPN this week. UFC 295. I believe they said was the 4th highest grossing fight in UFC history.
Yeah.
And
they sold.
They had it Madison Square Garden. Right, it was Madison Square Garden. And I think they had
it was Madison Square Garden.
They had close to 20,000 for a UFC fight. I think that's pretty impressive numbers for just in the crowd itself, and then to be the 4th highest grossing pay-per-view event. I mean,
it was a pretty anticipated fight. I mean, you had some really good characters.
Well, I
mean, the build up to it was awesome. I was so excited.
Okay, the guy, the light heavyweight. How do you say that guy's name?
Yuri or.
No,
Alex Pereira.
No, Yuri. How do you say his last name?
I don't know how you say his last name.
Prochaska, something like that.
Sean might know how you say his last name.
Yeah, but I mean, and it was kind of amazing that those 2 co-cards didn't go past 2 rounds, right? They were both.
No, the heavyweight was over in the first.
Yeah,
and then
the heavyweight was
Yuri
over in the first.
TKO in the second.
Aspinall and Pavlovich was over in the first round. So
yeah,
I'll tell you, I would like to talk about the fights for a minute.
Sure, go ahead.
I was blown away. So I finally got on and started watching when Dern fought God, what's her name? I've seen her fight numerous times. Who did she fight, Sean? Mackenzie Dern. Andrade.
Andrade.
Yeah, Andrade. Andrade. I've seen her fight before. She's a great fighter.
Fucking
I
killer,
could
dude.
not believe Dern tried to stand with her.
Makes no sense. Makes no sense. Yeah.
Blown away. I knew it was what was going to happen, and sure as shit had happened.
Mackenzie Dern is one of the greatest Brazilian jiu-jitsu artists, female artists of all time. And the fact that she decided to stand and trade with Jessica Andrade was absolutely fucking crazy to me.
This is stupid coaching loss there. Terrible.
Head movement.
Yeah. The heavyweight fight, I did not see that coming. That was wow. But this heavyweight, man, anything can happen at heavyweight. And then Yuri and Pereira. Sean and I were talking a lot about this fight before. I love both guys, so I was like really excited, and I was like, I'm not gonna be mad if like one guy loses because I like them both. Dude, just the beginning of the fight, the stare down between those two. Dude, I had goosebumps. I was so excited for that. I was on the edge of my seat. You got the Samurai Yuri and then like the Aztec Pereira just like staring at each other. That was so cool, dude.
You know, one of the coolest things about the fight game, Travis, I'm sure you get the same way, V. I'm sure you are too. And it's the same thing. It's for WWE for me in big matches. It's certain, you know, the kickoff of the NFL season for me, big fights. Do you guys ever like you get nervous? Like you're watching on the couch, and you're just like you're almost like shaking because you're like, oh shit, what's gonna happen? Oh, and like there's it's few and far between.
Edge of my seat for that one.
Yeah, it's few and far between that. You know, you get that feeling with something, and that's why you know people are drawn to sports. I would say one of the best things about this past year in LA was my family and I. We went to a ton of soccer games. We went to a ton of LA Galaxy games because we were able to go for free.
Right.
And I played soccer religiously as a kid. When I moved to Missouri, soccer really wasn't an option where we went to school. Obviously, there's no soccer team. So that was something that I was my whole, from ages 3 to like 10, that was my life. Mm-hmm. And then it was gone. And this past year, I really picked it back up. And it's a sport that Tony she really enjoys watching it. Julian enjoyed watching it. And I'm so happy that now I have like another sport that, I get to turn on and then get nervous about, like Sporting KC, a team was my first MLS team to go. I love Sporting Kansas City. I'm so happy to be in Kansas City now. Are they still? And they're in the playoffs. Yep. They unfortunately they played St. Louis. St. Louis, had a Cinderella story year. They were predicted to be the worst team, and they ended up being the first in the Western Conference. They ended up getting bounced quickly
by Kansas City.
By Sporting KC. But either way, I was excited, and I hope that SKC goes all the way. But I'm just glad that it's like, it feels like, every other day out of the week, I get to get that nervous, goosebumpy feeling about sports, and it's every kind of sport, and it's an awesome feeling.
Yeah, I really enjoy. I get that way with more football than I do anything else, because for me, football is the sport that I concentrate on the heaviest. And then I get in, like I said, WWE is where I go as my go-to. And then, I used to be bigger into baseball, but baseball anymore is just, it's lost they're taking away so much from the game with these clocks and the speeding up, and just let them play.
Baseball needs steroids again, man. Baseball needs steroids. Right?
They really do. Yeah. That was like a great era of baseball. Let them take whatever they want. Everyone pays to see home runs. Come on.
Yeah, and the thing is, baseball is the one sport where it's like, CTE ain't really a thing. Like, Mark McGwire...
UFC, I can see why you don't want steroids. A guy hitting a baseball, like, come on.
Yeah. Do you guys, since we're on the sport thing, and I actually was looking at the numbers, the covers for the UFC fight last week and who were the favorites and everything. How much of an impact do you guys think sports with the new? I mean, I shouldn't say new, but it's really developing now with sports betting on on the rise with all. I mean, everything from MGM to FanDuel to all, DraftKings. How much of an impact do you guys think that sports betting is having on the popularity and just what's going in sports in general? What impact do you guys think that that's having on sports?
I think it's increasing popularity for sure. I mean, I know UFC is always showing the odds, and your fighters are always promoting it and stuff like that. I think it adds to the experience. I don't personally do it, but I think someone who's investing money in that, like it adds to the experience, the nervousness, I know Drake's a big fan. That dude's always dropping like huge bets on it and stuff. That's like always one of the big things. Who's Drake betting on this fight?
You got the Drake curse.
Well,
yeah, the Drake curse. But I think it's mostly good for sports. Boxing, I think it gets a little shady with some of their betting because there's some questionable decisions in boxing.
Well,
I mean, you could say the same for UFC, but boxing's kind of in a rough patch, in my opinion.
And we had that conversation a couple of weeks ago too, Travis, about how boxing is kind of, not to be too punny here, but I mean they have really, boxing I think has kind of taken a black eye lately not lately, but in the past, but has, with being okay, are the fights fixed, or is the fix in, because people say it's the easiest thing to manipulate, and I don't agree with that, but I it just depends on how big the name is and how big they sell it, I think, anymore with boxing.
Well,
but
I think
go ahead, Sean.
And for me, boxing, where boxing struggles, and I'm gonna blame Floyd Mayweather on this. The problem with boxing is it got a little bit better the last 2 years. I will admit that it got a little bit better the last 2 years, and I think they realized they had to. So if you go back to like some of the golden era, of boxing, when you got your Muhammad Ali's, your Mike Tyson's, some of these heavyweights that were, legendary, legends of the game. If you go back to even like in the 40s, 50s boxing, there was an era where you had world champions that had 8 losses on their record. You had world champions that, were just guys that were dogs and would go out there, and sometimes they'd win, sometimes they'd lose. There were grudge matches, and it was amazing. Boxing for the longest time, thanks to Floyd Mayweather, it was if you're not undefeated, you're not in the conversation.
Right.
You would have guys that again, people would arguably say like, oh, this person could whoop that person, but they lost one match when they were 17 years old. And so they're not in this title contention. So then you had guys like Floyd that were, approaching 50-0 that were bullying these, 19-0 people because he was only fighting undefeateds. And that was the problem with boxing, is that people were, I feel like, were too afraid to potentially have a loss on their record. And because of that, we were robbed of like Floyd and Manny Pacquiao could have went on to have a trilogy if they would have just fought back in their primes.
Oh my God.
And they didn't. I think boxing got a little bit better with it, especially in the heavyweight division. I think it's getting better. In the heavyweight division, well, let me rephrase that. It got a little bit better to where you have now, aside from like Fury, a lot of the the top 5 heavyweight boxers in the world, they all have losses. So they all now have to go, I hope
now they have to. To your point, they have to fight each other.
Like now, it's like because they all have losses. Now they have to go. Okay, who is gonna Fury fight next after Usyk? Unless Usyk beats him. So, I hope that we get to that point in boxing where we can just have good fights again. We can have people say, you know what, I'm not worried about stat padding. I'm not worried about record padding. I want to fight anyone who's considered a top 5. If I'm the champion, I want to fight anybody in the top 5. If I'm in the top 5, I want to fight anybody to get to the champion.
To move up.
And I hope because you know what, people can talk all the shit on some of the matchmaking that the UFC does. At least the UFC will say, hey, if you're the number 10 guy and you want to fight the number 2 guy, well, let's fucking do it. And then guess what? 9 times out of 10, those guys are just going to do it. And that's what makes the UFC so, like I remember one of the big breakthrough fights of all time was when Nate Diaz beat Conor McGregor for the first time. Conor McGregor was already a champion, was considered at the time like the number 2 pound for pound fighter. And then he was like, yeah, I'll fight Nate Diaz on 2 weeks notice. Who cares? Nate Diaz being Nate Diaz said, I'll fight anybody. Shocked the world. And they had their rematch again on one of the biggest fights of all time. So that is what makes the UFC so appealing, is people can lose on any given night, but they're still going to get another shot.
Look at Pereira. He got knocked out at middleweight, and then 2 fights later, he's the light heavyweight champion.
See, and this,
you're able to bounce back. And
as an outsider, and I consider myself still kind of an outsider with UFC, but with UFC, you can get, I think you have so many big names. Yeah. With boxing, Travis throws these names at me, and I don't know a lot of these guys in boxing. When I was a college guy, and Floyd Mayweather was just coming onto the scene. Okay, you still had Tyson, and you had why have I just had brain farts? But like when Foreman made his comeback, I still remember watching that fight when Foreman shocked the world. He was like 52 or 53, has a win, and you just don't see, to me in boxing, you just don't see those larger than life figures anymore. These champs who stay around for, forever and make a name for themselves. Well, no, these UFC guys, you can go down a laundry list of all these UFC guys, and I think they're recognizable by their name because, like you said, guys, that, hey, number 10 guy, you want to go to number 2? Boom. Okay, let's go. And I think
UFC guys have done a much better job, especially now, of like getting a character and like marketing themselves than a boxer has.
Yep.
I mean,
like
I think reference Yuri and Pereira. Like Yuri is like a real life samurai. The guy like posts videos of him with a sword, meditating, all this stuff, and you got Pereira that dresses up in like the full battle custom headdress and stuff. You see him shooting bows at stuff. Like they play like these larger than life characters on social media, and then
and then they back it up.
I think they just market it so well.
That is exactly, you just hit the nail right on the head right there.
I love it. I love all of it.
It's how, exactly. It's how they market it. UFC, the fact that they've done 295, I can honestly tell you that I watched the first 10. We would all, the first, I still remember UFC 1. I remember Tank Abbott. I remember Hoist Gracie. I remember these guys who just went in there and pounded the holy hell out of each other, and there
3 times in one night.
It was a lot,
and it was a tournament. It was a tournament. So these guys come back out there, and Ken Shamrock, holy cow, Ken Shamrock, that guy. And UFC still continues to make, even though and whoever, whatever. How long has Dana White been?
He's been there from the beginning.
Dana White has become a smart businessman because he said, I'm going to do this thing that nobody else has done. But then he wants to recognize, okay, if I want to make it bigger, and I remember when people started criticizing him, okay, you're going to put these rules and all stuff. No, you'll lose. But he's only grown that thing. It's a multi-billion-dollar business that he's grown it into because he's smart, and he realized, okay, if I want to be, because at the time UFC, I think you could only, when UFC 1 was like, there was only like 2 states that they could actually fight in because of how brutal it was. And then when Dana White's like, okay, I'm going to sit down, we're going to have judges, and we're going to sit down rules, and we're going to say what you can do, what you can't do, where you can strike, how you can strike, And I think that, like you said, Travis, it's how they market it now, and it's just people go to these things, and whenever there's a UFC fight on, people are, they're watching it. So, hats off to those guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, wow. The clock on the wall says 10 o'clock already. I knew it would go fast.
That's how you get it done.
That is how you get it done.
Fast, too fast.
Travis, let's see the boy. Come on, let me see the boy. There he is. Little Mr. Kirkendall right there. Handsome little fella. Hey, you see it here first. You got the future arranged marriage right here. Right there. There's the bride. There's the groom right there. We're going to see it. I'll call it in 20 years.
They're both
Van Beber and Son's going to be DJing that gig, so we'll see what happens.
No,
my goodness. I am so happy for you guys.
They might just grow up together.
Fantastic. Exactly. Fantastic. Yeah, we're so thankful, and thanks for the comments tonight. And, man, anything else we're going to add tonight before we sign off?
No, again, it was so good to catch up with you guys. I'm happy that life is back into a regular routine. And I can't wait till we get back and hit the ground running with some really good topics next week. I'm excited.
Yep. So for Travis Kirkendall, Sean Phillips, I am Andy Van Beber. Thank you all for joining this week. And as Sean always says, be a friend, tell a friend, share with a friend. Catch us on all of the social media outlets that you can. We're on it. And we'll see you guys next week. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Voice of Reason podcast. Be sure to check out our other content on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok.